Hey, what's up, nerds? Time for another Mastering the Free People, and this time I want to get a little bit deeper on great companies. So, in case you guys have all been asleep, let's just take a look at the rules for Free Guild Great Companies again, real quick. Um, Free Guild Great Companies consist of 3 units. They can uh, be organized or I'm sorry, they are organized before you set them up on the battlefield. So you basically have to designate where they are in your list before the game. Um, your great company has to include a unit of Free Guild Guard with at least 20 models, and then 2 other Free Guild units of any type that have at least 10 models. Then what does this do for you? At the end of each enemy charge phase, units in a Free Guild company can lend support to other units from their great company if all of the following apply. The unit lending support is more than 3 inches from the enemy, so the unit lending support cannot be in close combat. The unit being supported is within 3 inches of the enemy. So one of the 3 units within the great company must be in close combat. The 2 units are within 6 inches of each other. So the unit lending support must be within 6 inches of the unit being supported. A unit lending support to another unit from its great company can either shoot as if it was the shooting phase or charge as if it was the charge phase. Whew! That's kind of a lot of text. All right. So what does this really mean? Each Free Guild great company is a unit of Free Guild Guard with at least 20 models, and then 2 additional Free Guild units. I think it's odd that they worded it Free Guild because they don't really clearly define that. It's not a keyword, it's not the allegiance, it's a name that appears in all of the unit names in Free People except demigryphs. So I don't know if this means that you can take any unit within Free People except demigryphs. Technically, you can take a unit of 12 demigryphs, so technically, in theory, if this works the way I think it's supposed to work, you can take a unit of 12 demigryphs and have them be part of a great company. So yeah, Games Workshop, once again, my services are available for proofreading and development because you guys seem to kind of need it. This is not really super clear. I think the intention of the rules is pretty clear, but again, uh, there's some serious rules loopholes in this as well. So, um, what it appears to be that the rules as intended are is Unit A gets charged, units B and C may charge or shoot the uh, enemy unit doing the charging if they're within 6 inches of the unit being charged. That doesn't exactly end up working that way. Um, so the unit lending support gets triggered at the end of the enemy charge phase, and it's like a game state effect. So if a unit in the Great Company is in close combat at the end of the enemy charge phase, then a unit from the Great Company within 6 inches may make a charge or shoot action. It doesn't say what has to be targeted, and it does not say that the charge had to be made during that turn. It does not say that the enemy had to be the one doing the charging and engaging you in combat. So this means that you can charge the enemy and force them into a position, as we'll talk about later, where on their turn they're forced to either retreat or face a hail of gunfire or arrows. Um, so yeah, I think this is maybe not rules as intended, but basically your supporting units can just go all willy-nilly and effectively get to charge and shoot on your opponent's turn as if it were your own turn. basically as long as one of the 3 units in the Great Company is in combat, and the other 2 are within 6 inches of it. So, um, this really supercharges your shooting, right? So all you have to do is have a Great Company with a shooting unit in it, and take another unit in that Great Company, charge it off into combat, keep it there, and your shooting units in that Great Company can just take a shot on your opponent's turn every turn, um, as long as that other unit being supported is still within 6 inches and still in close combat. This means that you're getting a lot of extra attacks with your shooting units that in the Freeguild, especially with all the buffs that you can give them, have incredibly high accuracy, a lot of firepower. Your handgunners have rend. Your crossbowmen can take double shots on your opponent's turn with the way the war scrolls are worded. If they have more than 20 in the unit and they didn't move in the previous movement phase. Shooting is really the thing that is like most benefited by Great Companies. The charge thing is good. The shooting thing is redonkulous. And I think this is going to be a big game changer in a lot of ways. Now, especially because of that little loophole that's implying that we don't have to target a specific unit as long as we have that trigger to shoot as if it's the shooting phase. We can target anything in range of our shooting. And when you're talking about crossbowmen, they have a 20-inch range. They can hit a whole lot of the battlefield with that. So that's really super powerful. So force compositions for these things. These are the basics that I think that we're probably going to see a lot. I see like a hammer anvil shooter triumvirate being, a good balanced force to be taking, and I see that being incredibly common to see on the battlefield. Hammer anvil also probably going to be pretty common. Basically just taking a big strong force and ramming it up the middle. Anvil shooter also probably going to be really common, especially if that anvil is, say, like a 40-man unit, and then you have 2 maybe 20-man units of handgunners supporting it, and it just makes for a ridiculous gun line. Can you do things other than this? Obviously. I've already seen cheesy lists floating around with people just running like all handgunners. I'm sure there's other sorts of things that you can do. You can run, all anvil units. You can just, run up and have a giant wall. That is definitely a thing you can do if you so choose. Although I don't think that's like the optimal use of Great Companies. So breaking down our unit roles as I see them anyway from the units that we have available in the Freeguild. Your anvil is really always going to be your Freeguild guard with sword and shield. They're super cheap. They have a 4-up save that rerolls 1s. They are really tough as nails. I've been running these guys as my main battle line ever since the first General's Handbook. I've been running like 2 to 3 units of these to fill out my battle line in almost every game. They're great at holding objectives. They're great at slowing your opponent down. They take a surprising amount of damage before they go down. Hammer units, your Freeguild guard with halberds are surprisingly good now, especially with the Indomitable trait on a general, adding to their save. And a Mystic Shield away as well from having a decent save. Great swords are your obvious choice for a really strong hammer unit. The Freeguild Guard are more of like a big swarm of dudes that, hit really effectively and have rend. The great swords are going to hit and wound effectively, have rend, throw lots of attacks, and they're relatively cheap. And they have a natural 4-up save, which is pretty awesome too. So I'm a really big fan of great swords. I was a big fan of great swords before. I thought at 160 points they were a really good deal previously. I just thought that running cavalry was a better option previously, but we've kind of lost our cavalry options now. So I think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of great swords on the table because those guys, pound for pound, are just, they hit like a ton of bricks. They just completely slice and dice anything that they run into, and you can buff the living hell out of them. Uh, Hitting and wounding on twos is not crazy for great swords. So, um, yeah, and the fact that they went down 10 points from the previous General's Handbook just makes them even better than they were before. I don't know how they justified reducing the points on these guys, other than maybe people weren't playing them that much because they just had other options that are relegated now to the compendium and don't have the Freeguild keyword. So anyway, enough ranting about that. Shooting units, handgunners, crossbowmen, obviously both really strong choices for shooting units. Your handgunners are some of the best shooters in the game, although they only have a 16-inch range. But working within the parameters of great companies, I think they're really highly effective because they're going to be moving up a little bit. They have to stay close to the other units in the great company, so that range becomes less of an issue. You're going to move them up the battlefield a little bit and then let them get their buffs in later turns for standing still and shooting. Crossbowmen, I think maybe slightly less effective. I think you really need to take these guys in units of like 30 to be truly effective, because they get their buff of double shots if there's 20 or more models in the unit, and just one of these guys getting taken out loses that buff and makes your block of crossbowmen pretty crappy. So I think handgunners are probably going to be the go-to for this particular style of play. Note I threw archers under the shenanigans category and not under shooting. They're really not that great of a shooting unit. Like, all things considered, they're basically hitting on fours, wounding on fours with no rend. I think they reroll ones to hit, and if they have big unit sizes, they reroll ones and twos. That's not really the important part here. The important part is that they get a free move before the game starts. And that is really super effective. That has all kinds of implications for creating zones of denial for your opponent for various different things. They bait charges. They're kind of a weird must answer sort of thing, even though they're not that powerful. They're just going to be taking free shots at your opponent if they don't do anything about them. And if your opponent does something about them, something bad will probably happen to them in turn. So they're a weird unit that's sort of like meant to run out and die for you, but ultimately help you achieve your goals. Unknown. I don't know how Outriders and Pistoliers are going to really fit into this dynamic. I don't know that they will. They're not really good in close combat, so you don't want to use the charge effect. And handgunners and crossbowmen are better shooters, so you would really prefer to use the handgunners and shooters as a shooting unit. They're fast, so other units are not going to be able to keep up with them. So I just don't know how they really fit in to great companies. You can take them. I'm sure somebody's going to try it out and do something crazy with them. Good on you. I don't really see how these guys are actually going to work in great companies. I didn't include demigryphs in here because I'm not entirely sure that we can take demigryphs, and taking demigryphs requires taking, 4 units of them, taking 12 demigryphs. That's a massive point sink. That's over 600 points that you have to sink into a unit of demigriffs to be part of a great company at all, and then it's a massive footprint, and what do you do with them? And I just don't really think they're a good idea. Um, Tactically, the whole big advantage of these great companies is that you can do crazy tactical stuff with them. Um, Something that I think I'm going to be doing all the time is making crazy reckless charges with one or more of the units into an opposing unit on an objective, especially charging in with an anvil unit. And it really puts your opponent in quite a predicament, because on the next turn, your opponent is, if you position things correctly and set yourself up, they're either going to be blasted by a whole bunch of handgunners and be in melee as well, or they have to retreat off the objective, that's a really good sort of position to be in. Like, you're either um, bullying them off the objective, or you're potentially just wiping out the unit anyway. So that's really good. You can bait charges and countercharge and shoot. That's kind of like the obvious thing. That I'm not sure that's how I'm actually even going to play these. This might end up being a much more offensive sort of tool to slowly push and bully your way across the battlefield with relatively slow moving units that are just backed up by artillery that does incredible amounts of damage. The off phase triggers, I think, are really going to be key. Being able to effectively, it kind of makes you be able to run and charge, because you can run a unit during your turn, and then if another unit in the great company is in close combat and you snake tail it out so that unit's within 6 inches, you can charge the main body of the unit off during your opponent's charge phase into something entirely different, kind of far away, if you set it up correctly. Obviously, it has the pitfall of what happens if that unit gets charged by something else, but nevertheless, that's definitely a possibility. This definitely has potential for like an alpha block sort of strategy, where you're running up tons of guys and jumping on objectives early and using really tough units that your opponent is going to have a tough time grinding down, and just holding there and shooting ever-loving bejesus out of your opponent until, either they move off the objectives and try and reform somewhere else and come up with a new plan, or you just slowly grind them down, or rather quickly grind them down, depending on how many shots you get off with handgunners. And area denial is going to be really huge with these. I mean, they're typically going to be pretty large units, and you can snake tail these guys out to be in, covering large areas. You can use archers to jump out in the middle, or after setup, so that you're denying the middle of the board to your opponent. There's all kinds of things that you can do with this, and there's just a lot of tactical opportunities that we can explore going forward. I'm really excited to see what kind of tactics we're going to be able to come up with using great companies. And I'm really excited for it. I think this is a really interesting tool, and it's going to take a while to master these things. And I'm already seeing that, the way that I had initially thought of using these is probably different than how I'm actually going to end up using them in the end. And it's cool. I like them. I really like this concept, and I hope that we don't get FAQs that nerf this. I have a feeling we will, because this is incredibly powerful if we play it right, and playing it right is not especially hard. So, anywho, that's all for now, folks. I'll talk to you all later.